Good morning, my friends. It is Wednesday again. Time for another dive into the scriptures and a time for brief devotional. This is still Easter week, and so we'll be reading this morning from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 through 19 and 21 through 32, which says this. Now that same day, two of the disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with one another, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together?" And they stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Clopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days?" "What things?" Jesus asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "We had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all of this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they too did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning while he was with us as we walked along the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Well, my friends, here we are, still in Resurrection Day. This is later that same day, and Jesus appears once again. So far, Jesus has appeared for Mary outside the tomb. He's appeared to the women between the tomb and their way back to the house. Later on today, he will appear in Jerusalem in the upper room behind locked and closed doors. And some of those who see Jesus, when they first see him, don't actually recognize him. I believe that's because of the anguish, the deep grief that these disciples are feeling. Grief has a way of pulling our hearts and our thoughts, our ability to think and recognize, along with our eyes, down into ourselves. The scriptures tell us that their eyes were downcast. It's difficult to recognize what's going on around you, or to recognize Jesus's presence when we are drawn within ourselves, when we are overcome with emotion, when our eyes and our hearts become downcast. But in time, something happens and they do recognize Jesus. For Mary, it's hearing Jesus speak her name, Mary, and suddenly she realizes that the one in front of her is the Lord. For these two disciples, it is that breaking of the bread and giving thanks to it and giving it to them, just as had happened at the Last Supper. This act of breaking bread with Jesus is what causes them to suddenly realize who he is. Now, in this story, we discover a couple of things about Jesus and some things about ourselves as well. First of all, we get a sense that Jesus has changed. His physical nature has now become a spiritual nature as well. Jesus is capable of being sighted in multiple places on the same day, which would be physically impossible to be along the road to Emmaus, outside the tomb, at the tomb, and in the upper room all on the same day for someone who is merely physical. Also, we know from later on that Jesus appears in the upper room behind closed and locked doors without about those doors being opened. Again, here with these disciples, once they recognize that it's Jesus who has been with them, teaching them, talking to them, sharing in their grief all along, he disappears from their sight. And we discover that there is this change now in Jesus's physicality. But we also discover that Jesus is now present everywhere that the disciples are. Wherever there are disciples with a heart who seek him, with a heart who desire to be with him, to know him, to understand what has happened to them, to him, Jesus comes to them and he explains it to them very clearly. For the women along the way back to the house, he tells them what to do. For Mary at the tomb, he gives her the mission of going and telling the others. For the men in the upper room, he shares a meal with them. He explains to them what has occurred. And for these disciples on the road to Emmaus, he also explains to them from all the scriptures, we are told, everything that concerning himself and what all of this means now that he is risen from the grave. Jesus is present with them. He walks with them, he talks with them, he wanders along with them, he eats with them, he shares in their grief as well as in their joy, and he teaches them as well. And the thing we learn for ourselves from all of this is that the same is true for us. That if Jesus is in our hearts, then Jesus goes along with us and instructs us and gives us hope and joins in our grief and our joy, is present with us in every waking moment. Jesus goes with us to the grocery store, when we're out in the world buying gas at the gas station, when we're out in the yard raking leaves, when we're making a meal, when we're sharing it with our families, when we're taking care of our children, whatever it is, wherever we go, Jesus goes with us throughout our day. So the question is, do we recognize him in all these various places? Do we realize that Jesus is right there with us? Do we stop to listen to what it is he may be saying to us? Do we invite Jesus into our homes? Do we invite him at the table with us to share in our meals? You see, Jesus isn't only found in church. He's present everywhere his believers go. We come to church on Sunday in order then to worship him together. We gather at this place, this building, which in my case happens to be right around the corner from me, but for some of you that may be in a house church, maybe in a park church, gathering together with other believers. We gather together with fellow believers, and that is what makes us church. We do so on Sundays to worship together, to lift our voices as one in prayer and in praises for all of what Christ has done for us. We join together in order to plan our mission to the world. We join together on Sundays to be fed by the word and through the sacraments and through sharing them together. We join together as church to be challenged by one another in our various ideas about the world and about faith and what we struggle with and what we are rejoicing in as well. We join together on Sunday mornings to be taught in the story. And we share this story with all fellow Christian believers who likewise on Sundays set aside that period of time as one set for the Lord, as a holy moment in our week that we gather together in order to recognize who it is we follow and who it is that follows along with us as we go throughout our week. We come together on Sunday mornings to be fed by Christ so that we can be sent back out into the world. Church is the place that we grow. It's the place that we practice our faith. We practice living in a community with one another. And then as we are fed and filled once again in our worship time together, we're then cast out once again outside those doors to go back into the world and live out our faith with Christ right alongside there with us. So I hope this day that you are finding Christ in everything that you are doing, no matter where it is that you may be going or who you may be spending your time with, that you'll take a moment to listen for Christ's voice and look for him in all of the things and places you will go this day, and for the days between now and this coming Sunday when we gather once again for worship as God's people. God bless you, my friends. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.